What's going on, guys? Stevie from the Minute Masters here, and today we're gonna pull the engine out of my truck. So for those who haven't been keeping up, this is part 2 of a 2-part series. Part 1, we went and we disassembled everything from the front of the engine, so we're completely disconnected up front. So the only thing that needs to happen is I need to unmate the transmission from the back of the engine, and we are good to go. Now, of course, I've taken the liberty of hooking up the hoists, so as soon as that sucker is free, we're yanking that bad boy out of there and getting this moving. My goal, and yes, it might be ambitious, is to have that engine out in less than 1 hour. Think I can do it? Well, let the sweating begin. We're gonna yank this sucker. Okay, so the first step for back here is we're gonna undo the exhaust. So here's your 2 exhaust manifold bolts that hold on to your what would eventually be your Y pipe, as you can see there. Now, I've done this before, so they are actually, at least they should be kind of looser or easier to get off. So you'll remove those on both sides, and then we're free from the exhaust. So I'm here on the passenger side of the exhaust, and as you can see, I got 1 bolt off. And when I put this back together after the transmission, I just did a through bolt. So it's actually a little easier the second go around. But that other bolt back there is hard to get at. So one thing to make it easier to get at is remove your starter. And it's that bolt there and this bolt here, and the thing pops off. So I'm gonna do that to get at that other bolt, and we should have the exhaust off. All right, as you can see, I have the exhaust unbolted up there. And then, so by taking off the starter, we've eliminated yet another step, because those bolts that hold the starter on are what hold the this plate to the transmission, and that would have to come off. The other thing you want to do is unplug your O2 sensor, okay? Because that is, clicked into the harness that's also attached to the engine. So you can do that as well. So moving right along here, the next step in the food chain, can't quite see it, but right here in front of your transmission is this plate, okay? You're gonna wanna take that plate off so we can get access to the bolts that hold the torque converter on. So, but you're gonna do that by taking this nut off and this nut right here, okay? So take those off and we'll show you how to get at those torque converter nuts. All right, guys, so here we are. This is the flex plate of the transmission. That's that geared cog there. And right behind it in blue is your torque converter, okay? Now the flex plate bolts to the back of the engine, and the torque converter just plugs into the transmission. Now I don't want to take the torque converter with me, so I want to unbolt it from the flex plate, and that's what this nut is here. So there are 4 of them that hold the flex plate to the torque converter, but you can't get at all of them all at once, and you have to rotate the engine to get them. So what I did is I have a nut on the end of the breaker bar, which is hooked to your flywheel. There's a huge nut on the front. And so reaching forward from my position, I can pull on the breaker bar and rotate the engine, thus lining up the nut where I want it. Now, in order for that to be made easy for you, you need to put your transmission in neutral so that everything turns freely. So I'm gonna make all the necessary rotations and take each one of these bolts off, and I'll bring you on to the next step. All right, guys, so I've taken the bolts off the flex plate that connect to the torque converter, and now we're looking down the transmission towards the engine, okay? And all around the bell housings, is called, are all the main bolts that hold your transmission to your engine. Now, these are a little tricky to get, especially those up top, and there's 2 right up top, that one there and this one. So what I do is I do this, impact gun, and a ridiculous amount of extensions. There's 1, 2, 3, and then there's like my ginormous one, okay? And I have my socket on the end. And this seems to do the trick for me every single time. So hopefully it works just as well for you, but you've got 2 up top, you've got 1 here on the side, and I believe there's 1 or 2 more on the other side. There is one that's on this side here that's kind of accessible without all the extensions, but just underneath here, it's really easy. And the nice thing is you have all the room underneath your truck to kind of sit up and do this, so you're not in a really awkward position. So I'm going to take those bolts out and I'll bring you back.
All right, guys, so on to the next thing here. One thing I did leave attached, like I said, I left certain things attached that flew fluid. It was the fuel line. So I've already taken the liberty of disconnecting one. That's right there. And then here's one back there that's still connected. So you'll notice that they have this really peculiar kind of connector, okay? It's a quick disconnect. Ford just loves these things. And, you know, they're pretty good if you know how to take them off. So what you will need is one of these, and it clamps around, and this edge right there that you see sticking up right there, that inserts into the end, this end, and it pushes that like white donut. It expands it, and that also expands like some metal prongs that hold it on there. So that's what you have to do to get those off. So I'm going to take that one off and move on to the next step. So right along the side of your transmission, here's your transmission pan, is your exhaust. And there's this one real pain in my ass emissions thing right here. And as you can see, it's really rusted. So I've resorted to cutting it to get it off, at least the U part. So I'm actually thinking I'm going to leave it on there in the hopes that when I yank the engine out, maybe something will happen. I know, not the best of idea, but I'm kind of done with it. So that brings us to the very last step here, and that's the engine bolt. So there's one there, and there's one on the other side. So just undo that, and it's just a matter of, we're going to start to wiggle the transmission separate from the engine, and hopefully I can do that by lifting up the hoist. Now, before you go and do that, get a block of wood or something and put it underneath your transmission. I'm sure there's probably a way that this thing balances and stays in here that I'm unaware of, because normally I'm used to yanking the engine and trans out at the same time, and I'm not doing that this time. But I don't want to take any chances. So put a block of wood under here so this thing stays upright, so it doesn't, you know, the engine doesn't come out and the thing just flops down. So block of wood under here. Take your two engine mount bolts out right up there, and let's get this thing out of here. All right, guys, engine bolts are off. We're all disconnected, and it's time to get this sucker out of here. So basically what you're doing is you're gonna lift the engine up, right? And you can see it's moving. And at this point, since it kind of swings, we're gonna try to pry it away from the transmission. So you're gonna get into there with a little bar, and you're gonna try to pry it slowly in this direction, okay? Because you're gonna try to take up this space. And then we're gonna see how much space we have, and that will determine whether or not I will have to undo these hinges on the hood so we can pull it back farther. More than likely we will have to, but I like to do things in progressive stages, because, well, if you can get away without doing it, why not? So I'm gonna do that, bring you guys back. All right, here we are, guys. She's loose. So basically, you know, I got everything loose, and I kept jacking it up and wiggling it forward and jacking up. The big thing is you can start to move it forward once that's your bolt there for your engine mount. Once that is clear of the hole, then everything can start to come forward, in which case it's easier to pull it against the transmission. So in this case, I would come back here and I would give it light little tugs and bring it forward. And that's what actually helped me get it to where it is now. So as you can see, I can see all the way around the back of the engine here. You can see the flex plate. And so I still have room here in front of me, and the engine still has plenty of give. Now at this time, and don't mind my dirty face because this is just what happens when I do this. At this time is normally when you find the things that you didn't disconnect. And trust me, I mean, you might be really good and you get everything the first time around, but I know for me, there's always like one or two little things that totally skipped your mind or you forgot to do, and they're still connected. So that's my time to kind of go around here and find this. So like one of those was like this power steering hose right here that went to the underside of the reservoir. It's the kind of thing you don't really see looking around the engine, but you know, I found it this time around. So I'm gonna find those little things. I'm gonna, you know, disconnect them, and I'm gonna pull this out. Now, as far as pulling this out, as you can see here,
I unbolted these from the hood, as you can see here, and I managed to get this thing to creep up even more. So with the added room up front and here, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to clear the engine right out of the bay here without having to remove the hood or do anything else, okay? So, good to go there. I'm gonna pull it out, and I'll bring you back if I notice anything you need to know. All right, guys, I found the ultimate sneaky bolt under here. So I thought I had everything free and clear. I started pulling up, and I noticed I was just getting a little bit too much resistance. So right here, underneath your smog pump, is this bolt. Matter of fact, there's two on there. One holds the transmission cooler lines, and you can see that bracket right there. The other one holds the ground to your engine, okay? So yeah, it's really buried up inside of there, and until you start to pull the engine up and create this space, it's very hard to get at. So keep that in mind when you are pulling your engine out. So here we are, guys. The venerable Ford 5-liter 302 small block V8 is finally pulled from its perch. And it is disgusting. So I took off the flex plate because I wanted to check to see if the main seal was good before I bolted up to this engine stand, because I have to get this hoist back to the rental place tomorrow, and well, that's the kind of jam you are in when you work out of your own garage. So of course, the main reason I pulled this out, if you don't quite remember, is to fix that crack right there in the frame. You can see those two bolts. So I've got to fix all that, clean up all this grind, and of course, do a little refresh on some gaskets on the engine, and it can go back in. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you have noticed that I didn't do this in an hour. The sun is down, and yeah, well, that's what happens. You encounter some difficulty, and you work at it, and you work at it some more, and hopefully you get it. So that's kind of the thing that comes with doing these projects. But I hope after watching this video, some of you consider actually doing this, because it is really worthwhile. And as you can see, paying someone to do this could get very expensive if you haven't already priced it yourself, where this doesn't cost me much more than the lift in my own personal time, which, if you're wondering, it was just $30 for the hoist. So keep that in mind next time you need to replace an engine and or weld your frame back together. So anyway, guys, that's all for me. I'm gonna clean up and finally put myself to bed here, because it is late and I am filthy. So hit the subscribe icon over here. Check out some of my other videos. I'm Stevie from the Midmasters. Thanks for watching.